We love talking to Patrick Basham of the Democracy Institute. He's based in Washington, and there is so much on the international menu today that we need to focus on. Patrick Basham is Skyping us from Washington. Patrick, thanks so much for doing this.
My pleasure, Charles. Good to be with you.
Let me start with something that is anything but benign today along the Atlantic coast, and that would be this nor'easter, the weather. Is it impacting in your neighborhood at all?
We are just on the edge of it, so we're either going to get very lucky or very unlucky in the next 24 hours. But, Washington, D.C. is America's Vancouver. I mean, schools are closed today because it's raining heavily and there's a little bit of snow. People are panicking as they always do. So we're not prepared for it the way that a Boston or even a New York City is. So please God, we don't get it.
Well, people drive... Let's just say some people don't drive very, very well in the area, and their driving completely goes off the rails when the weather gets a little bit tender. So maybe the idea of keeping some of them off the roads today isn't a terrible idea from the perspective of public safety. Let me go switch carefully and quickly here to Greece. Even left-wing sites are calling it an ultra-left-wing government. What's the impact of what Greece and Greek voters did over the weekend?
Well, the true impact is to be decided, but what they have definitely done, the Greek voters that is they have set up a tremendously important game of economic chicken in Europe. Because what's going to happen over the next coming days, possibly weeks, is that the new Greek government, which is filled with Marxists and socialists and a whole hodgepodge of lefties, they are going to have to sit across the table from the economic and financial gurus in the EU from Brussels, and we're going to have to see which side blinks first. Because what's going to happen is that the EU is going to say to the Greeks, we've been bailing you out, but if you want any more of our money, you've got to pay back, make your debt repayments on schedule, and you've got to adhere to the fiscal discipline that the government you've just defeated had in place, cutting government spending, privatization, tax hikes. And the new Greek government is going to say, we are not going to pay you another cent unless you forgive us half of our national debt, you reschedule the debt payments, and you let us go ahead with reflating the economy, more government spending, let's hire more government workers, let's raise the minimum wage, et cetera, et cetera. And anybody who tells you they know what's going to happen, is misleading you. I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know that the consequences are going to be felt throughout Europe at the very least if this thing isn't resolved satisfactorily in the coming days and weeks.
All right, look, anyone who's lived a life knows that Marxism can be brutal, and people often ask, well, why would they ever hold an election? Marxists, if they hold elections, they're going to be voted out. But sometimes we forget that Marxists are voted in, and this was a democratic election. Now, they can get voted in, I think, if their leader is charismatic. And would you view Alex Tsipras, the new Prime Minister of Greece, as a person with a considerable amount of charisma?
Yes, I would, for sure. He's got what he needed right now. He's 40 years old. He's youthful and fit-looking and telegenic. He's a good speaker. And this isn't his first rodeo. His party, 3 years ago, they almost pulled off what they pulled off last night. They came a very close second to the Conservatives, who continued to bungle things, and so now it's their turn. But for sure, these kinds of far-left parties with a charismatic leader under dire economic circumstances can get elected, because we have to realize the situation in Greece is pretty bad. Unemployment's 26%. It's a third of the country is either in poverty or near the poverty line. A lot of people are suffering. The problem is that his party's solutions are just going to make things worse. But that, of course, is the lesson, sadly, that Greeks will have to live through, and which means that come the next election, his party will probably be out of power.
But I suppose his message to the people of Greece and to many, this is a message that is appealing, is that the Germans who run the European Union and their banker friends throughout Europe, including bankers in Greece, they have been screwing you, and it's time for us to fight back. That is essentially the battle cry, right?
Absolutely. This is being done to us by the bad folks in our own country, but most importantly by those very bad people, politicians, bureaucrats, foreigners beyond our borders. And so a lot of people who aren't leftists in Greece have voted for this party simply to send a message. It's one of those times when a lot of people have just said, look, to hell with all of the establishment parties, to hell with the system. I want to protest, and I want something to change. And so a lot of the people who the journalists have spoken to in recent days in Greece have acknowledged they don't expect the new prime minister and his government to fix everything, but they think that any change at all has to be in a positive direction. I mean, I think that's incredibly naive, but you have to understand, at a human level, why people who have been through such tough times are willing to look at the most preposterous potential solutions just because it's different.
All right. Look, in the course of history, there are fewer calamities that are worse than those that result from currency manipulation and currency desecration. And I'm not using that word in any kind of hyperbolic sense. If Greece is thrown out of the EU, and if the Greeks are forced to get off the euro and go back to what they used to call the drachma, is it possible, Patrick, that the drachma won't be worth the paper it's printed on?
It's possible, because if Greece goes on its own, goes alone economically in terms of its currency, the Greek government will only be able to pay for things by literally printing money, printing drachmas. And unless they get their house in order simultaneously, which it doesn't appear they plan on doing, they are going to be in even worse trouble very, very quickly. So if they leave under this government, it's even worse news for the Greeks themselves. The irony, perverse irony perhaps, is though it'll be difficult for the rest of the EU in the short term, it may not be the worst thing. The main downside of the Greeks leaving is that it sends a message to those who were part of the euro currency zone that, change can happen. And countries can make up their own minds, although these days they're not supposed to decide much for themselves. It's all supposed to be so interwoven and interdependent. So Brussels is very concerned primarily because of the message it sends beyond Greece, less about what happens within Greece itself, because Greece is a relatively small economy.
Are there some countries that are relatively successful in the EU that want Greece to leave, and perhaps want Portugal and Spain and perhaps some others to leave as well?
Well, there are certainly countries, generally the northern and central European countries, who have had it up to the back teeth with the so-called Mediterranean countries, the ones you've named, who they feel, or they believe they know, have over years and decades lived beyond their means and have either now or have recently looked to the rest, the more fiscally prudent parts of Europe, to literally or figuratively bail them out. So the frustration level is very, very high. There are no governments who are brave enough yet to say we'd be better off without them. Let's get rid of them. However, within the United Kingdom, within Germany, within France, there are growing political groups that is growing in popularity who, in addition to being anti-EU on principle, they are also against the bailouts. Germany, it's within Germany very strong right now, too. And so we don't know if any of those parties or groups will ever take power, but they are certainly becoming more influential. And the fact that they are taking votes away from the governing parties, taking support away from those who hold power now, means that if you want to hold on to the reins of power, you've got to start taking notice of what those people are saying and the sentiment that they're tapping into. So the anti-Greek sentiment, the anti-Portuguese, anti-Spanish sentiment is one that is on the rise, and it's going to be part of the dynamic, part of the equation as this stuff gets sorted out.
Patrick Basham, a couple of years ago, the European markets, and to some extent North American as well, were quaking in their boots every time there was a notion that Greece might do a so-called Grexit, an exit from the EU. So they're closer than ever to it now, and yet I take a look at the markets right now, and the major market in Europe, of course, is the German. It's up by 144 points. It's up by 1.36%. So it's as if this Greek election never happened. So what's changed in the last couple of years? Why are the people who invest in Europe not worried about Greece anymore?
Well, They are, to a certain extent, still worried, but there's two things that have changed. One more long-term and one very, very recent. The more long-term is that investment markets, what they pride themselves on is they discount for things that are going to happen or that are projected to happen, whether those are viewed as positive or negative. So this election result is not a shock. It's not as if the polls didn't have the leftists ahead. As I said earlier, they came very close to winning power a few years ago. So it's not seen as good news, it's seen as bad news, but it's news that has been factored in to people's investment decision-making in recent times. The second change, which is very recent, which is just as recent as last week, is the European Central Bank has decided to double down on quantitative easing, basically buying bonds and keeping interest rates low and ensuring that the economy in Europe doesn't deflate so much that it goes back into recession. That is good news for the markets in Europe, at least in the short term, because it means that the macro picture, the general picture across Europe, is good in terms of money supply and in terms of signals to investors that things are sort of being looked after, things are going to be okay. So whatever the problem in Greece today, the larger problem in Europe looks a little less dark than it did a week or two ago. Now, all this can change very quickly, and as I said earlier, it depends very much how the negotiations, assuming they do take place in Greece between Athens and Brussels, play out. But those are the two reasons why Europe today, from a market perspective, an investor perspective, doesn't look catastrophic. But, watch this space.
In just a moment, we're going to continue our conversation with Patrick Basham, who is at the Democracy Institute based in Washington.